Hi, I'm Jarvi and you're welcome to my channel. So this is kind of an artwork plus tutorial plus how I paint and everything combined video. So let's get started. I am starting with like cool base, a really thin wash, and I'll gradually sculpt the face. And I always use blue in my shadows. So the color I use for base, I've added a little blue in it to make like a cool toned shadow color, and I'm using like a little bit of red or peachy shade for midtones, and I'll just gradually add thin layers of color like to build up layers in gouache, and I'll try to sculpt the face so that it will look more 3D and not like flat. I'm working with thin layers, so if by any chance I made a mistake, I could easily remove the upper thin layer. And gosh, once dried, it like really settles with on the paper, and it is easier to build up layers to create depth and shadows while painting with gouache. And I'm using like a lot of muted tones, like even for shadows I used a muted color. And now for the eyes, like around the eyes and for the lips as well, I have used like a really muted red, and it brings the whole muted or like light aesthetic together. And it is not looking good right now, but trust me, it will. Like, I slowly add more details and I refine the details so it will look more good and combined, or more 3D, you can say, a while later. I messed up near the eyelashes because I have been making content since a year, and I'm always making vertical format videos. So the horizontal format videos are like kind of hard for me as the camera is between me and the painting. So it's like kind of hard to paint. And here for the eyes, for the pupils, I have used this muted lavender kind of, not, it is not even lavender, it is somewhere between red and purple. And I just make colors. I just make like muted colors, and I just add white in them to make them more lighter, and then I add more pigment in them to make them darker, and that's how I work with the palette. And I know it's really hard for me to explain, but I hope you're getting it. Like, I'm using at least like four colors, and I'm making like numerous shades by combining them and then adding white in it, and it looks so cohesive. Now for the hair, I generally split the hairs, and I first start with like a really cool blue gray to make the highlights, and I love doing it because it makes the hairs look more 3D and rendered, and I love the effect. And then I'll add like more blue pigment in the previous color, and I'll just go over the blank spaces and I'll fill up the parts. I hope you're getting what I'm trying to explain. This adds like a really cool tone to the painting, and I'm just giving like a bold brush strokes so that it would work as shadows. Line weight is like really important whenever you paint, and it adds like a really good depth whenever you need shadows. The paint is really fresh right now, so it kinda reflects, but I hope like after a while when it will be dry, I hope you can like see it. And then I'm using the same pigment I used for the face to go over the highlights, and it makes it look more cohesive, and Then after I am just, you know, adding more depth with like a more cool blue, muted blue, and I'm doing the same technique over and over again. So it adds like really good texture as well. I actually really love this color palette. It looks so beautiful, and this is the fun part for me. Whenever I paint, I usually explore a lot of color palettes and do they work or do they not work. And there are like few color palettes which I have stored or like saved in my memory. And now I'm adding more highlights to the front hair. I love the shine. I'm also adding more like contrasting shade to the eyes to make it look more defined, because the earlier layers were like quite messy, so it adds a good level of depth. By far you may have like noticed I'm using the same technique, which is like layering and then defining and then defining. And it's quite simple if you get hang of it. You really have to wait for all the layers to dry before you apply another layer, because it might look muddy because we are using muted tones. So there is a high possibility that if you layer them over wet tones over and over again, it may turn out muddy. Painting clothes is like my worst favorite part, because they just took the excitement of finally finishing the painting. Actually, hairs took a lot of time to paint, and then there is like a big chunk of clothes which are remaining, so it's underwhelming experience. I'm using the same cool color palette for the clothes as well, and I'm using the pigment I used for the skin for the highlights. And this part is like you should really watch, because I used a flat brush and I gave like a gray wash to the clothes, and I don't know how I did it. It was something which turned out good, and it wasn't even intentional, but it did turn out good. And it took me less than like 5 minutes to paint the clothes, and I made history here. I'm just defining the shadows, and I also did this texture with the brush, which looked good. And to add more depth and shadows to the folds of the whatever the cardigan that he's wearing, I used this muted red which I used earlier for the eyes, and it looks good. By far I'm just layering it like watercolors, and it's quite fun to layer gouache. And the last part which really tests my patience is the sparkles, because they have to be like very precise at the ends, and it's one of the most toughest parts of a painting. I hope you understood my painting process, and English is not my first language, so it's quite hard for me to do voiceovers, but I hope you understood me. And that's it for today, and let me know if like there's anything you want to learn specifically from me, or do you have any suggestion. I linked the pin reference in the description below, and I'll see you later. Bye bye. Subscribe for more.